Scientists turned sunlight into quantum entanglement. For decades, quantum technology has depended on a very controlled and demanding source of light, lasers. Lasers provide the coherence and precision scientists need to manipulate quantum states, but they also require energy, specialized equipment, and carefully controlled environments. Now, researchers have demonstrated something that sounds almost impossible. Ordinary sunlight can be used to generate quantum entanglement. In an outdoor experiment, scientists used sunlight to create pairs of photons with quantum correlations remarkably close to an ideal entangled state. The experiment achieved about 94% similarity to a perfectly entangled state, while also producing correlations that violated Bell's inequality, an important signature of genuine quantum behavior. The breakthrough could eventually point towards simpler and more energy-efficient quantum technologies, including secure communications, quantum sensing, and even future quantum computing systems. To understand why this matters, we first need to understand quantum entanglement. Entanglement is one of the strangest phenomena in quantum physics. When two particles become entangled, their quantum properties become linked in a way that cannot be described simply as two independent objects. Measurements performed on one particle are strongly correlated with measurements performed on the other, even when the particles are separated. Scientists use these unusual correlations for technologies such as secure quantum communication, ultra-precise sensing, and quantum information processing. But creating high-quality entanglement usually requires carefully controlled light sources, and lasers have traditionally been among the most useful tools for producing the required optical conditions. Sunlight, by comparison, seems almost completely unsuitable. It spreads in many directions, contains an enormous range of colors, and is highly incoherent in space and time. In simple terms, sunlight is messy compared with the highly organized light produced by a laser. That apparent disadvantage is exactly what makes this experiment so interesting. Scientists have traditionally assumed that the strong correlations needed for producing entangled photons require highly coherent light. In a coherent light source, the electromagnetic waves maintain a predictable relationship with one another. Lasers are excellent at producing this type of organized light. Sunlight does not behave that way. Its waves arrive with many different directions, frequencies, and phases. But earlier research by scientists at the University of Ottawa had already begun challenging the assumption that coherence was absolutely necessary for producing entanglement. Their experiments showed that even incoherent light from an LED could generate polarization-entangled photons. The important insight was that light can be disordered in some properties, while still maintaining enough structure in another property to generate quantum correlations. The new research takes that idea much further by replacing the lead with something far more powerful and naturally abundant, the sun. The researchers used a process known as spontaneous parametric down conversion, or SPDC. In this process, incoming light enters a special nonlinear optical crystal, where individual photons can effectively produce pairs of lower energy photons. Under the right conditions, those two photons can become entangled. Normally, researchers use a carefully controlled laser as the incoming or pump beam. In this experiment, however, the researchers used concentrated sunlight instead. The challenge was to make sunlight powerful enough to interact effectively with the tiny nonlinear crystal while preserving the specific properties required to generate entanglement. That required an unusual piece of optical engineering. Well, the nonlinear crystal used in the experiment was only about 1 millimeter in size. Collecting enough sunlight and directing it onto such a tiny target is extremely difficult using ordinary optical EQ equipment. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Light addressed this problem by developing an all-glass, cone-shaped solar concentrator. A Fresnel lens approximately the size of a household window collects sunlight and focuses it into an optical fiber roughly as wide as a human hair. The concentrated sunlight can then be delivered precisely to the microscopic nonlinear crystal, providing the optical energy needed for the photon generation process. But concentrating sunlight was only part of the challenge. The researchers also had to make sure that the sunlight's enormous diversity of colors and propagation directions did not destroy the quantum correlations they were trying to create. Their theoretical work predicted that if the entanglement is encoded specifically in the polarization of the photons, then the relevant factor is not necessarily whether the incoming sunlight is spatially or temporally coherent. Instead, the researchers could preserve the necessary polarization characteristics while allowing the sunlight to remain highly incoherent in other ways. This gave them a way to turn something as naturally chaotic as sunlight into a useful source for quantum entanglement. The team then took the experiment outdoors and tested the system under real sunlight. Using a technique called quantum state tomography, they reconstructed the quantum state of the photons produced by the system. The result was striking. The sunlight-generated entangled state showed approximately 94% similarity to an ideal entangled state. Even more importantly, the researchers observed correlations that violated Bell's inequality. This matters because Bell's inequality provides a way to distinguish certain genuine quantum correlations from explanations based entirely on classical physics. The observed violation therefore provided strong evidence that the experiment had produced genuine quantum entanglement rather than simply ordinary correlations between photons. If this technology can be developed further, one of the most interesting applications could be in space. Imagine a future quantum satellite that does not need to carry a powerful laser system to generate entangled photons. Instead, it could potentially use the sunlight already surrounding it as its optical energy source. Because sunlight is abundant in space, such a system could reduce some of the energy requirements in supporting hardware associated with onboard lasers. The researchers suggest that sunlight-driven entanglement could eventually contribute to the generation of secure encryption keys for quantum communication between satellites and ground stations. The possibilities may extend beyond communications. Quantum computers and other quantum technologies are expected to become increasingly complex, and controlling large numbers of quantum systems could require significant energy and sophisticated optical equipment. If naturally available light can perform some of the functions traditionally handled by lasers, it could potentially provide a more accessible route towards scaling certain quantum photonics technologies. The experiment also suggests that other nonlinear optical processes, including four-wave mixing, could potentially be explored using similar ideas. However, this is still a proof of principle experiment, not a finished quantum technology. The researchers are now working to increase the brightness of the entangled photon source and improve the quality and efficiency of the generated quantum states. Practical systems would also need to operate reliably under changing environmental conditions and produce enough entangled photons for real-world applications. What makes this discovery particularly remarkable is how far it moves from the traditional picture of quantum technology. Scientists once expected that the delicate quantum correlations required for advanced applications would demand highly controlled, highly coherent laser light. Now researchers have demonstrated that the enormous, seemingly chaotic light output of our own star can also be used to generate genuine quantum entanglement, and that could lead to a fascinating future. Instead of using enormous amounts of engineered energy to create the precise quantum light needed for advanced technologies, some systems may eventually draw directly from the most abundant light source available to us, the sun. Quantum entanglement powered by sunlight may not yet be ready to transform computing or communications, but it has opened a surprising new direction in quantum photonics, one where the light from an ordinary sunny day could help power the quantum technologies of tomorrow.